Well, since there's no Kevin Dyson or Derek Mason or some of your crew walking through the door, we
Yeah.
gotta figure out some of the future around here with the Titans receivers. So, uh, technically, several people have sent me messages lately, like, is this guy a free agent? Is that guy? Could the Titans sign? The league year hasn't technically ended yet,
Right.
so all the things you're hearing about, like, oh, Mike Williams, where the Bucks he has like a roster bonus to be on the roster today. He and Baker Mayfield both had a roster bonus. And so somebody said, well, if they don't pay it, does that mean the Titans could just sign him today? No. Nobody actually becomes a free agent until the end of the league year. And then there's the legal tampering period that's the last, 3 days of the league year. And then the new league year starts. And that's the day that we'll be on the air just saying this guy's going here for this much and that much. And But nobody can sign until the new league year. Now, you could sign your own free agents.
Right.
As I understand, you could.
Yeah. And nobody's has signed yet. No big names have signed. Yeah.
So you could sign your own free agent starting right now. You can also cut guys. As soon as the Super Bowl is over, teams can start cutting guys. Like saw the Steelers make cuts the next day, cut Mitch Trubisky. So 99 problems, and apparently Mitch was one. So here's who is playing receiver for the Titans right now. This is per Spot Track. This means who is currently under contract will be for 2024 with the Titans. D-Hop, Traylon Burks, Kyle Phillips, Colton Dow, Kearis Jackson, who signed as a free agent last year, Mason Kinsey, who never goes away. He's still under contract. And oddly enough, Trayshawn Harrison, who was in camp last year, but the way his contract was structured, Spot Track shows that he is still on the team for 2024. That was a surprise to me.
I saw his name come up.
Yep.
That was interesting.
So he was in camp last year, and a guy that we all got a look at, but he's still, based on his contract status, still shows that he's part of the Titans. So we don't necessarily have to get much into Trayshawn Harrison.
Yeah.
But DeAndre Hopkins, Traylon Burks, Kyle Phillips, Colton Dowell, Kearis Jackson, Mason Kinsey. So let's operate off of those 6 guys that we have a pretty good working knowledge.
All right. So really, you can circle D-Hop, and then the rest it's up for debate. I think based on that, the free agents that are there, with Chris and Nick, those would be the only other 2 I think would be debatable to me. I think Kyle has kind of overstayed his welcome in a way from the injuries and lack of productivity. I think the things in which he was brought here for has not materialized. The return game, I thought he was going to be a guy. He trended that well to be able to move the chains in critical downs. That didn't work out. Colton Dow, I think, is interesting. I think he's a guy who adds value from a special team standpoint. Big body,
right?
Still young, still learning the game from a big perspective, right? Smaller school, but I think he has potential to be a productive backup in this league. I look at a guy like and a friend of mine, Marcus Kemp, who won multiple Super Bowls with the Chiefs. He's been around the league, but he was a backup receiver, the backup to the backup, but very productive in special teams as a gunner and things of that nature. And they just kept signing him. He's had a 6-7 year career because of it. And I think you can look at if Colton can continue to develop as a receiver and continue to develop and compete on special teams, he can find his way on an NFL roster, if not here specifically. But after D-Hop, you really got to start looking at what are we going to do. I think you mentioned it earlier. I think you got to find somebody that can take the top off the defense. I think you got to find somebody that can get vertical consistently. The other piece that is missing from the Titans locker room, from a receiver's perspective, is what A.J. Brown brought to the equation. A.J. can get vertical, yes. We knew he could, but he could turn a slant from a 7-yard completion to a home run.
Right.
And that is where you got to look. Other free agents that are out there, there's very few like that. More of these guys are vertical guys. There's very few that are the shifty, make you miss, and turn a 3-yard gain into a 30-yard gain. There's a few of those guys out here. Not a whole lot. Very few. Most of them are to the other side. The the more lankier, the more bigger, thicker guys that are going to win jump balls and things of that nature, run skinny posts, run go routes, run deep crossers, deep digs, things of that nature. That's more or less the free agent pool.
Mm-hmm.
But you look in the draft, there's a Malachi Corley, a guy that's at Western. You look at his legs, he's got them thicker stoles. He runs, he plays physical. He stiff arms people. He plays with bad intentions. He just got to work on a couple things in his game. But that's a guy that you can embed into your receiver room later in the draft, and he adds immediate value. Now, I don't know how he will be in the return game. They can develop him as a returner. He can be another guy that can be substantial as far as coming in as a young rookie. But this free agent list for receivers, man, is going to be interesting to see where a lot of these guys end up. You know, like Mike Evans. Mike Evans is a perennial 1,000-yard receiver. Every year he's been in the league, Pro Bowler.
I said Mike Williams earlier. Mike Evans.
Mike Evans.
Said the wrong Mike.
Yeah. And if you talk about a guy like that adds to your roster, but do you spend that on a 30-year-old receiver who you probably got just a few years left? You got that already. You got that with D-Hop. So do you do it again and complement with D-Hop, or do you go younger on the other side of D-Hop? That's going to be interesting to see what the Titans do.
Let's talk about a couple of guys that Titans fans spend a lot of time talking about, Treylon Burks and Kyle Phillips. Now, you mentioned Kyle Phillips. Like, we all kind of thought, okay, we see him practice every day. We'd come back and talk about him like, oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
His short area quickness, his ability to separate. Now, if you had a 40-yard dash, there were probably other guys on the team who could outrun him. But if you had a 5-yard dash where you had to turn to run one way then the other, he could probably beat a lot of people at that. Been injured. Hasn't translated, didn't get a lot of opportunities. You know, there was a game last year, Dice.
Yeah.
And I'm sure either you and Lucas or you and Brent, whoever you're doing the post game with that day, where they deactivated him so Burks could go and just run down the field on every play and get his game shape again.
Yeah.
That's where he was.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think as this new – because here's the thing. I told the story late last week. When I was at Arkansas State and I was working in radio, then I worked at the college. We had 5 coaches in 5 years. So every time a new coach came in, he would take some guy who had been down the depth chart and he'd be like, I love this guy in my system. You should be playing. And inevitably there'd be a couple of guys who'd been starters and he'd go, I have no idea why this guy was starting. He's too slow. He's too small. So we had 2 of our best defensive players. One got benched 1 year and it took him till game 2, and then he was all conference after that. He just had to win back the new staff. Next year, another guy, Q Lee, who actually got a tryout with the Titans, they said, you're too small to play linebacker in our system. Well, it took him the entirety of camp, but he wound up starting. He was all conference. He got a cup of coffee with the Titans. I wonder if Callahan and these guys, they watch film. My gosh, they'll be back on the field soon again for OTAs and stuff. Do they look at somebody like Phillips and go, there's nobody else like him on the roster. We can use him.
Absolutely.
Even if it's not in the return game, because Vrabel talked about him like, well, if he's not returning punts, why is he?
Yeah.
He basically said that at one point. Well, I mean, he's not returning punts anymore.
Yeah.
What are we even doing? Well, he's a slot receiver. You need one.
Yeah, and that's kind of, to me, when he built that rapport with Tannehill his rookie year.
Yep.
I remember us talking about it. I was like, oh, that's going to be the third down guy, the one to move the chains, extend drives. You know, he might not average 13, 14 yards a catch, but what you're going to look at when you look at the PFF stats is third down efficiency. He was the guy getting more first downs on third down because of his ability to separate and catch the ball in traffic. But then injuries transpired, and, you know, then you draft another receiver, and, you know what I mean? You're going to give him an opportunity to play. And I think uniquely, you might be right in the sense that Callahan, you got a clean slate.
Yeah.
So if you're out here, you got another opportunity. It's like a fresh slate. So they're looking at you with different set of lenses. They're just out here trying to evaluate. Now, don't get me wrong. They've watched film. They know you.
They would have scouted him.
Come on.
Yeah.
And they probably evaluated you in college. So they got a general idea. But now they're here in their offense. And I think if you look at what Cincinnati has done with Boyd and Higgins and Chase, a 3-headed monster, 3 guys capable right there at the cusp of 1,000 yards. He's looking to emulate that in some form of fashion. And if you look at the Titans roster right now, do you have 2 1,000-yard receiver and a third that's verging on 1,000 yards? You don't.
Oh, history says no. It says you have D-Hop and other people.
Yeah. You know what I mean? And I'm not, that's not to say anything bad about them, but you mentioned Traylon Burks.
Right.
I think Traylon is not the vertical threat that we had hoped.
Yeah.
He's not become the vertical threat. He still, I think, could be of value in on this roster, if not in the National Football League, because of his size and his stature. But his health has kind of derailed him every time he takes a step forward. Trust me, I empathize with this a lot. Every time you take a step forward, he's taking 2 steps back because of nagging injury, and then he can never get going. And then you throw into the fact that he's in a system where the primary ball carrier and person touching is a running back.
Yes.
His opportunities become even more limited. And so, but the difference being when you do get those opportunities, like we saw him drop the post and we saw some of the things vertically, he didn't seal the deal when he did get those opportunities. So this is a big offseason for Traylon. I think he has to basically treat this as I'm going into my rookie year and I'm trying to prove myself for this coaching staff. Show you that you drafted the right guy. Because the pressure he must have had coming in after A.J. Brown and what A.J. Brown did here in his short stint, and everybody's comparing him to that. They even, you're 6'1", 200, and you're from the SEC.
His comp was A.J. Brown.
Yeah.
Seriously, that was his comp.
Yeah. And so then you come in right after that guy?
Yeah.
So now that should be out, clean slate, out the window, new coaching staff. What can you do now? And I'll be curious to see how they utilize his skills or where he's at right now in his career.
When they drafted him, because I'm from Arkansas, so I'm not the biggest Razorback person, but obviously I'm from Arkansas, so I called a couple people, like, okay, tell me what you know. Most of the reports on him were pretty good. There was the interview with Sam Pittman, though, that sort of made the rounds, and we played the audio where he's like, essentially said he's got to get in better shape. We got to see more of that from him, and he's a real good guy, but we need to see more from him. But I asked people about that, and they said, no, it all got straightened out. You're going to love this guy. Like you said, it's kind of been 1 step forward and 2 or really even 3 steps back. But I did all this looking into him. So I screenshotted. I'm here with a doctor of doctoring, so I can't mess up.
I'm not a doctor of literacy.
Not a doctor. Okay. All right, we're safe here. So I went back and found this from right around the time the Titans drafted Traylon Burks, high in the first round, to replace A.J. Brown, who was an outside receiver.
Mm-hmm.
This is from Austin Gale, who was PFF guy. Career routes run by alignment. And it was the top receivers in that class that year. Traylon Burks, outside, 149, slot, 681.
So he's a slot guy.
So here you go. There's more. But wait, there's more from PFF College. Here's another one. Highest graded wide receivers out of the slot this season. Number 1, Traylon Burks. Number 2, JSN. Number 3, Wan'Dale Robinson. Slot receivers. I got one more for you. Most TDs from the slot in 2021 among SEC receivers. Jameson Williams had 8. Traylon Burks had 7. And if you watched how Arkansas used him,
that's what he did.
They did gadgety stuff. But
they used him like Debo Samuels.
Yes.
They used him like that.
Here's a huge dude who's powerful. Like you said, 6'1" and 2 whatever.
Yeah.
Let's just extend the ball to him with short throws, pitch it to him.
And let him go play.
Yeah, and let this big guy, this big bully with fairly explosive, maybe not the fastest guy, but here's a big explosive athlete in the SEC. Let's just let him athlete.
Yeah.
And I know in the NFL you can't out athlete people, but if this is what this guy does in his highest and best use.
Yeah. So you're trying to change his talent to fit the mold of what you need on offense.
Yes.
And he might have been the highest rated receiver on your board at that time. And I like that comparison. Remember if I told you, he reminded me of Anquan Bolden more than he did A.J. Brown.
Sure.
I know he was getting the comparisons to A.J. Brown. He was more Anquan Bolden, which was a slot receiver.
Right.
He was a big guy that worked in the slot. Fitzgerald was outside when he was in Arizona. So he was making his money inside, physical, banging against linebackers, getting hit by safeties, making big catches. And you look at some of the more productive offenses in the National Football League that have 3 receivers, and I'll use San Francisco as an example, and what they have done with Deebo Samuel, being able to motion him to the backfield, pitching it to him on the run, just putting the ball in his hands. And I think Traylon is, and I mentioned I started this conversation with, he is not the vertical threat I think they were looking for. That's not his game.
Right.
You know, that was always kind of a question mark for me. I think his 40 speed was enticing. His size is obviously enticing because he's a big guy. But that never really has, from what I've seen, has been his game. Now, we haven't seen a whole lot of the let him work the zone and inside route. We haven't seen a whole lot in the pro game.
Yep.
A little bit. And he has made a few plays. But aside from the injuries, the inconsistency of opportunities has also kind of stymied his growth as a receiver. Now, the injuries is the biggest part of that, obviously, because you got to be on the field to develop. But when he's out there, probably because of the inconsistency of him playing, you haven't seen him consistently be a part of what the offense is doing. Now, Titans' offense for a few years was Derrick Henry, and everybody else just kind of got what they can get after that. So this offense is going to be drastically different this year.
Right.
Whether he does something, which he has mentioned, he's going to do something very similar to what they did in Cincinnati, which has been highly productive. Now we're going to see if Will is similar to Joe. Because Joe Burrow's, you know, it's off topic. We get to this later, but you break down quarterbacks into thirds. The top third is your top 8 to 10 quarterbacks, and those are your elite. They're not going anywhere.
Right.
The middle third is those guys that, you know, have a good year, creep into the Pro Bowl, have good careers, but they're not quote-unquote elite. The bottom third is the guys, they're still good football players. They just have some things about them, and they seem to be they get moved to another spot, to another team, and they never get solidified to be able to develop because they don't produce fast or quick enough. And I'm hoping Will is right now in that middle group that he can work his way up. And with that, though, if you talk about comparing him and Joe with the 3-headed monster receivers, he's going to have to be, you know, he can't, I'm not putting him say he got to be Joe Burrow. I'm not saying that because Joe was an MVP guy and all that kind of stuff, been to Super Bowl, all that kind of stuff. I'm not trying to put that pressure on him, but he's going to have to be pretty good going forward and develop and work really hard, really, really well with Callahan to understand where he wants these footballs. Because you look at what Browning did coming in relief this past year.
He'd never played. He'd been in the league since 2019.
And look what he did.
He had a winning record and a nice quarterback rating.